The air was heavy with ash, the sky a muted gray as the sun fought to break through the smoky haze. Sitting on a weathered bench outside a temporary shelter, Barron Trump stared into the distance, his usually composed demeanor now marked by quiet vulnerability. "I can still hear it," he began softly, his voice carrying the weight of the memory. The roar of the flames, louder than anything I'd ever imagined. It felt like the world itself was screaming. His eyes, a mirror of both sorrow and strength, flicked to the camera as he continued. "Losing our home wasn't just about the walls and the roof, it was about the life we built inside it, watching it all disappear." He paused, swallowing hard. "It changes you." Barron Trump had always been a figure of curiosity, his life unfolding under the public's unrelenting gaze. Yet few had glimpsed the quiet teenager behind the headlines, the young man who preferred books to cameras, nature to the bustling social events that often defined his family's world. On the day the wildfire struck, Barron had been at home in California, a rare retreat from the limelight. The sprawling estate, nestled in a secluded valley, had always been his sanctuary. It was there he found peace, far from the cacophony of public life. "I love that house," he said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "The way the sunlight poured through the windows in the morning, the little garden my mom and I worked on together, even the creaky floorboards in the library. It felt like us." But that peace was shattered in a single moment. The wildfires that had raged across the state for weeks finally reached their valley, carried by fierce winds and relentless heat. The family had only minutes to evacuate. "I remember running through the house, grabbing whatever I could," Barron recalled. His tall frame seemed smaller as he recounted the events. "It was chaos, my mom calling out to me, the heat pressing against the windows. My dad trying to keep us calm, even as I could see the fear in his eyes." The house, along with thousands of others, was consumed by the flames that night. The Trumps escaped with their lives, but lost nearly everything else. For Barron, the days that followed were surreal. "We went from this life of security and stability to sitting in a shelter with nothing but a couple of bags. It was humbling in a way I can't really explain." He described the eerie quiet of the aftermath, the silence that hung over the burnt remains of their home, the absence of the birds that once filled the air with song. "It wasn't just our house that was gone," he said. "It was the whole world around it, everything that made it feel alive." As Barron spoke, his words painted a vivid picture of loss and displacement, but also hinted at something deeper, a quiet determination to rebuild, not just the home they had lost, but the sense of belonging it represented. The days following the wildfire were a blur for Barron Trump. The once familiar rhythm of life had been replaced with uncertainty, each day unfolding like an unwelcome surprise. The family moved between temporary accommodations, their belongings reduced to what could fit into a few hastily packed bags. For Barron, it wasn't just the material loss. It was the weight of seeing his parents, especially his mother, struggle to maintain a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos. "She was always the rock," he said, his voice soft but steady. "But even she looked lost some days." Then came the moment that changed everything. A visit to what remained of their property. The media had been relentless, circling like vultures, but this visit was private. Barron, his parents, and a few trusted staff members stood among the ashes of their former home. "I didn't want to go at first," Barron admitted. "What was the point? It was gone. But my dad insisted, said we needed to see it to move forward." The sight was worse than he'd imagined. The house, once so full of life and memories, was now a skeletal frame, barely recognizable. The garden his mother had tended to with such care was nothing but scorched earth. As they stood in silence, a faint glimmer caught Barron's eye. Curiosity led him to a spot near what had once been the library. Kneeling in the soot, he unearthed a charred but intact photo frame. Inside was a picture of the family, taken years ago at a beach, smiling, carefree, untouched by the weight of the world. "I don't know why, but that moment hit me harder than anything else," he said. "It was like the house was gone, but this tiny piece of it refused to let go." Barron held the frame up to his parents, who were equally stunned by the discovery. It was a reminder of what they still had, each other. "It wasn't about the things we lost," he reflected. "It was about the fact that we were still here, together." That simple discovery ignited something in Barron, a resolve to rebuild not just the house, but the sense of purpose and unity that had defined their family. "I realized that we couldn't let this define us," he said. "We had to take what was left and start over." Rebuilding after the wildfire presented challenges that tested Barron Trump in ways he had never anticipated. On the surface, his family's wealth and influence might have suggested an easier path forward, but Barron quickly learned that some challenges transcend money. Internally, Barron grappled with feelings of guilt and helplessness. "It's strange," he confessed. "I kept asking myself if there was something I could have done differently, if maybe I'd noticed the fire sooner or reacted faster, would things have turned out differently?" These thoughts weighed heavily on him, compounded by the responsibility he felt to support his family. His father, while a pillar of resilience in public, was visibly strained. It was the first time I'd seen him unsure, Barron recalled. He's always been larger than life, so seeing him pause, question, it shook me. His mother, though determined to rebuild, was emotionally drained. Barron often found her staring into space, lost in memories of the life they once had. Externally, the challenges were equally daunting. Insurance claims became a bureaucratic maze, delayed by endless paperwork and disputes over coverage. The media frenzy surrounding the family's tragedy added another layer of stress. Paparazzi camped outside their temporary residence, hungry for any image or soundbite. There was no privacy, Barron explained. Every moment felt like it was under a microscope. Even the process of rebuilding their home was fraught with difficulties. Local regulations required adherence to new safety standards, delaying construction. Community meetings about wildfire prevention brought heated debates, and while many neighbors were sympathetic, others resented the attention and resources the Trumps seemed to attract. Barron also faced personal struggles. At school, he became the subject of whispers and stares. Friends who once treated him as just another teenager now approached him with either pity or curiosity. It was like I wasn't me anymore, he said. I was just the kid whose house burned down. Yet, amidst these challenges, Barron found small moments of clarity. Late at night, he would sit by the window in their temporary home, gazing at the stars. The sky looked the same as it always had, he mused. It was a reminder that some things stay constant, even when everything else falls apart. These quiet moments strengthened his resolve. I realized that the only way forward was to face everything, every delay, every doubt, every obstacle, head-on, Barron said. If I gave up, what would that say about the people who were counting on me? The months following the wildfire were a turning point for Barron Trump. As the ashes of their old life settled, so too did his perspective on what truly mattered. The experience catalyzed a transformation in him, shaping his priorities, his character, and his vision for the future. Barron began to immerse himself in the recovery efforts, not just for his family, but for the broader community. He volunteered at local shelters and worked alongside organizations helping displaced families find temporary housing. It wasn't about the name Trump, he explained. It was about being human and standing with people who'd lost just as much, if not more, than we had. During these efforts, Barron's natural leadership qualities began to shine. He organized fundraisers that brought together people from all walks of life, neighbors, school friends, and even celebrities who offered their support. One such event raised enough money to rebuild a community center that had been destroyed in the fire, earning him the respect of many who had once viewed him only through the lens of his family's fame. Academically, Barron channeled his experiences into his studies. A school project on environmental science became a passion project, where he explored the impact of climate change on wildfire frequency. He collaborated with experts, attended lectures, and even presented his findings at a local conference. It wasn't just about understanding the science, he said. It was about figuring out what we could do to make sure this doesn't happen again. At home, Barron took on a more active role in supporting his family. He became a confidant for his mother, often sitting with her over tea as they discussed plans for their new home. With his father, he found common ground in strategic thinking, helping to oversee logistical details of the rebuilding process. It wasn't about them leaning on me, Barron reflected. It was about us leaning on each other. Perhaps the most profound change, however, was in Barron's outlook on life. The wildfire had stripped away material comforts and the illusion of invincibility that had come with them. In their place, it left a raw understanding of impermanence and a deep appreciation for resilience. Barron also began to explore creative outlets, channeling his emotions into writing and music. It was a way to process everything, he shared. His compositions, a mix of introspective lyrics and haunting melodies, resonated with peers and strangers alike when he shared them online. His journey caught the attention of the media, but Barron was careful to shift the narrative away from himself. This isn't just my story, he often said in interviews. It's about the thousands of families who go through this every year and the steps we need to take to prevent it. The young man who emerged from the devastation was no longer just the son of a prominent family. He was an individual with a purpose, driven by empathy, a sense of responsibility, and a determination to make a difference. In the years following the wildfire, Barron Trump's life became a testament to resilience and the power of transformation. What began as a tragedy evolved into a journey of rebuilding, not just homes and communities, but also personal identity and purpose. Barron's contributions to wildfire recovery extended far beyond his family's experience. He launched the Phoenix Initiative, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting families affected by natural disasters. The organization provided immediate aid and long-term solutions, including rebuilding homes with fire-resistant materials and developing educational programs on disaster preparedness. His initiative gained national recognition, partnering with environmental scientists and policymakers to advocate for sustainable practices that could mitigate future disasters. At school, Barron became a voice for youth advocacy. He spoke at conferences and environmental forums, using his platform to amplify the voices of those often overlooked in discussions about climate change. His speech at the United Nations Youth Climate Summit was particularly poignant, where he shared his personal story and called for urgent action. "We can't undo the past," he stated, "but we can shape the future, and that future starts with us." On a personal level, Barron's creative endeavors continued to flourish. His music, deeply influenced by his experiences, struck a chord with listeners worldwide. His debut album, Ashes to Light, was a fusion of raw emotion and hopeful melodies, earning critical acclaim and connecting him with a global audience. Through his lyrics, he shared not just his pain, but also his healing, inspiring others to find strength in adversity. As he matured, Barron embraced a role that few might have expected of him: a unifier. He worked to bridge divides, whether between political ideologies or socioeconomic classes, emphasizing shared humanity over differences. His efforts were not without challenges. Criticism and skepticism followed him wherever he went, but he met them with humility and a steadfast commitment to his principles. The legacy Barron Trump built was not just one of service but of perspective. He proved that even those born into privilege could choose a path of meaningful impact, one grounded in empathy and action. "Life isn't about what you have," he once said in an interview. "It's about what you do with what you're given." In the end, the wildfire that had threatened to consume everything became a symbol of renewal. From its ashes, Barron Trump rose, not just as an individual, but as a force for change. His journey inspired countless others to turn their struggles into strength and to see challenges not as endings, but as beginnings. As Barron looked back on his life, he reflected on the journey with gratitude. "The fire didn't just take from me," he said. "It gave me a chance to find myself, to redefine who I am, and to leave something better for those who come after me." By the time Barron reached his early 20s, the world had begun to see him not just as the son of a prominent figure, but as a leader in his own right. His transformation from a young man struggling with the aftermath of personal loss to one of the most influential voices in environmental and social advocacy was remarkable. Barron's journey of healing and rebuilding, both for himself and for others, had come full circle. His work with the Phoenix Initiative had expanded globally. What began as a local effort to help those affected by wildfires had grown into a massive network of support for people impacted by all kinds of natural disasters. Barron's focus on preventive measures like fire-resistant housing, water conservation, and sustainable farming practices had garnered attention from governments and corporations alike. He wasn't just talking about change, he was helping to make it happen. But it wasn't just his professional life that had evolved. Barron's personal growth was just as profound. Having once felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, bearing the expectations of his family's legacy, he had come to understand what truly mattered. His quiet demeanor, once seen as aloof, was now recognized as a sign of deep thoughtfulness and emotional intelligence. His ability to connect with people, to listen without judgment, and to lead with integrity had earned him respect across all walks of life. In the midst of his success, Barron had found a sense of peace. No longer haunted by the shadows of his past, he had reconciled with the loss of his home, his childhood, and the life he once knew. The fire had changed him, yes, but not in the way he had feared. Instead of breaking him, it had forged him into someone stronger, more compassionate, and more focused on the future. Barron's days were filled with meetings, speeches, and fundraising events, but he never lost sight of the people who had supported him along the way. His family, though forever marked by tragedy, had grown closer, their bond strengthened by the shared experience of rebuilding. His relationship with his father, once strained by the demands of politics, had found a new depth as they worked together on various philanthropic projects. For Barron, the future was no longer something to fear. It was something to shape, to improve, and to leave a legacy for the next generation. His work wasn't done, he knew that, but as he stood at the helm of several initiatives dedicated to preserving the planet for future generations, he couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction. The boy who had once lost everything had become a man who had given everything back. And in the process, he had found a purpose that transcended his family's name, his past, and even the tragedy that had once defined him. As Barron stood on the balcony of his family's estate, looking out at the sprawling landscape below, he couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. The once scorched earth where the wildfire had ravaged his home was now a thriving, lush green patchwork of forests and reclaimed land. The sight was a reminder of the long and arduous journey he had embarked on, a journey that had taken him through grief, loss, and self-discovery. The fire had been a devastating force, tearing apart his sense of security and comfort. But in its wake, it had also given Barron the chance to reshape his life. The tragedies he had endured, the struggles he had faced, each had carved out a path toward a deeper understanding of who he was and what he could contribute to the world. He had always been in the shadow of his family's name, but now, Barron realized it was his own actions that defined him. His commitment to fighting against the very forces that had once taken so much from him had transformed him into a symbol of resilience. It wasn't about being the son of a former president anymore. It was about being someone who stood up for what was right, someone who had turned personal devastation into a collective purpose. As he glanced down at the papers in his hand, plans for new projects, partnerships, and initiatives, Barron understood that the work was far from over. He was now more determined than ever to ensure that the lessons learned from the wildfire were carried forward. The Phoenix Initiative, which had started with just a handful of volunteers, was now a global movement, and he was its guiding force. But Barron knew that the true test of his legacy wasn't in the accolades or the recognition. It was in the lives he had touched, the communities he had helped rebuild, and the environment he had worked so tirelessly to preserve. He thought about the people he had met along the way, those who had lost everything, just as he once had. And he thought about how, together, they had managed to rise from the ashes and start anew. Looking out at the horizon, Barron felt a sense of peace wash over him. The past had shaped him, yes, but it no longer defined him. It was the present and the future that mattered now. And as he thought about the road ahead, he couldn't help but feel a quiet but unwavering hope for what was to come. Barron Trump had come to understand something fundamental in his journey, that the greatest strength lies not in what is lost, but in what we choose to build in the aftermath. And with that knowledge, Barron knew that the future was in good hands, his hands, and the hands of all those who, like him, had refused to be defeated by the forces of nature and fate. The story of Barron Trump, a young man who had faced tragedy and emerged stronger, would forever serve as a testament to the power of resilience, hope, and the enduring human spirit.